Masechet Beisah, daf 29. And with this daf, we hope to complete the third perek of Masechet Beisah. And we are discussing the laws of measuring on Yom Tov, which are very relevant, but also a little bit complex. So we begin with the Mishnah, which sounds a lot like a previous Mishnah. Lo yomar adam latabach shekol li bedinar basar. Aval shochet umechalek benehem. You can't go to a butcher and say, weigh for me a dinar's worth of meat. But what you can do is slaughter an animal and then give it out. Okay, you get a half, you get a third, whatever everyone wants. Okay, even though the Mishnah before said something just like this Mishnah seems to be adding something. It's not that I say, I'm going to pay you a dinar. It's just that it's using the money amount in order to ascertain how much meat he wants. How much meat do you want? And he's not saying a pound or half of the animal. He wants a dinar's worth. So even though he's just using the money as a way of saying the amount, not that he's saying I'm making a deal with you with this money. Nevertheless, that is not okay. But you can apportion it according to a ratio. Good. Hechi avid. So now the Gemara asks, so what can you do? All right, and obviously, as we said before, the best thing is to prepare from before Yom Tov and make a list and say, okay, here's 10 people. Here's exactly what we're going to pay and what we're going to get before Yom Tov. But a lot of times you don't sometimes you don't have a chance to do it before Yom Tov. What should you do on Yom Tov? Oh, so you know what? In a lot of places, the butcher would cut it into standard pieces like this. In Surah, they would say tarta. Maybe it comes from the Greek, meaning a third, or half of a third, meaning a sixth. And so people generally want a standard amount, like you get a pound of ground beef. Right, you don't get 0.9 pounds of ground beef. So in the city of Neresh, they would just say a portion or half a portion, standard sizes. They had different language in Pupadita. Over there they said a quarter or half of a quarter. And so that would be a simple way. Without saying the money amount, you just say the standard size, or half of the standard size, and so on. Okay, next Mishnah. So here's Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda is going to argue with him. Tanakama says, if you want to get a wine or oil, and often the purchaser would bring his own jug. And so he's allowed to say, please fill up this jug with wine. That's okay. But what he cannot do is bring a measuring cup and say, I want a liter of wine. That's no good. Okay, so we understand that distinction. Rabbi Yehuda is a little bit more stringent and says you cannot use a measuring cup at all. So you have to just use, a regular standard glass. You come and say, fill up this regular glass. That's okay. But if it's a jug that's used for measuring, and this is a liter jug, then you cannot even say, fill up this jug. You can't use that at all. Whereas according to Tanakama, it sounds like you can use that jug as long as you don't say, give me a liter. Okay, but the Gemara will give two interpretations of this machloket. Maaseh. Abbas Shaul ben Botnit שהיה ממלא מידותיו מערב יום טוב ונותנן ללקוחות ביום טוב. Abbas Shaul was stringent in this matter, so it seems this story seems to support the second opinion that you cannot use anything. You cannot use any measuring cup at all. And so here's what he would do. Before Yom Tov, he would measure out many jugs with 1 liter of wine. And then on Yom Tov, the person would come in and he would just give it to them and say, you want a liter, here it is. It's pre-measured, so there's no problem of measuring on Yom Tov. So that's a good idea by Abbas Shaul. Now this is Abbas Shaul ben Botnit, not to be confused with Abbas Shaul, a different person who comments on that, on Abbas Shaul ben Botnit, and he says, Abbas Shaul omer, af b'moed oseh. Abbas Shaul ben Botnit, he didn't do this because he didn't want to measure on the holiday. He would do this even during Chol HaMoed. He would pre-measure. mipnei berurei midot. You know why he did it? Because he was a very honest person. And what happens, just like Coca-Cola, when you pour it, there's a lot of foam and you have to wait a long time. So sometimes when you order a Coke and they give you half a glass of foam, hey, you didn't fill it up. You have to wait a long time till it goes down. Same thing with wine, has foam. And so Abba Shaul did not want to cheat his customers and give them foam. So he would go before Yom, during Chol Moed, he would go the night before and fill them up. And that way he could wait till they settle and fill them up exactly. And that's why he filled them up beforehand, before Yom Tov. Not because he was Mahmir. And so you see, he was not being Mahmir like Rabbi Yehuda. He could follow Chachamim. So Abba Shaul is backing up the opinion of the Tanakama. And another reason he did this, even on a regular day, not even Chol HaMoed, all year long, he would fill up the measurement before. And this is for an additional reason, similar to Abba Shaul's, also because of honesty. What happens is if the customer comes and brings his own jug, and then I have some oil, and I pour from my cup into the customer, and let's say I have a pre-measured one, pour it into the customer. The problem is, in my jug, the store owner, there's still a lot of oil on the side. You have to wait a long time till it all drips down. And if he does that, he'll be cheating the customer of that excess that remains on the serving pitcher. And so therefore, he would all week long, he would do this, all year long, he would do this, and people would come in and he would give them the pre-measured cup, give them the cup too. And I guess the customers would bring back the cup when they were done, like we used to do with the glass milk bottles and give them back to the milkman. Good. So that's Abba Shaul, who did all the pre-measuring. Okay, so we have these two opinions here, Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda. Let's give two interpretations of it now. So my aval lo b'midah. What does he mean over here that you can say fill up this jug, but you can't use a measurement? What's the difference? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Shemuel, aval lo b'kli miyuchad lemidah, aval kli haomed lemidah yimale enna. Shemuel's interpreting this the machloket in a more stringent manner. He's making Shemuel almost like he's making Tanakama almost like Rabbi Yehuda. He's saying that you cannot use a measuring cup, the usual measuring cup that you use all the time. You're not allowed to fill it up at all, and you can't bring that to the store. However, you can use the backup measuring cup, the one that you haven't used yet. You have it in the closet. If you need it, you would use it, but you don't usually use it. You haven't used it yet. So it is a measuring cup, but since you haven't used it yet, so it's not really been used as a measuring cup, that's one that's allowed. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, even that one, even the backup measuring cup, you're not allowed to use. Okay, so in this instance, really both say the measuring cups are not good. The one that you regularly use, you cannot, even Tanakama says you cannot use. So now, Alma gabe simchat Yom Tov, Rabbi Yehuda lechumra v'Rabbanan lekula. Now we have a contradiction, because in the Mishnah above, Rabbi Yehuda was the person who was machmir. But in another matter, Rabbi Yehuda is the one who is lenient. Just recently, when we're talking about using a balance scale, Rabbi Yehuda was the one that was lenient. And he said, you can use a balance scale. You just put the cleaver on one side, or some other vessel, and the meat on the other side, and then you're allowed to use it. Chachamim say you cannot use a balance scale at all, no matter what you use as a counterweight. So Alma Rabbi Yehuda lekula v'Rabbanan lechumra, kashat Rabbi Yehuda ad Rabbi Yehuda, kashat Rabbanan ad Rabbanan. So in that instance, Rabbi Yehuda is the lenient one, and over here, Rabbi Yehuda is the stringent one. And similarly over there, Rabbanan was the machmir regarding using a scale, and here regarding using measuring cups, he's the one that's lenient. So this is strange. How come they are switching opinions? And so we're going to answer the question. The contradiction of Rabbi Yehuda against Rabbi Yehuda is not a problem. Over there, regarding the counterweights, what are you using? A cleaver? A cleaver is not a measuring tool. It's not even a backup measuring vessel. You would never during the week use the cleaver as as a weight, and therefore he's more lenient there. Whereas here, even the backup measuring cup is a measuring cup, so that's why he's machmir. So that's the reason. In other words, it's not case by case basis. דרבנן דרבנן מלקשה התם כעבד כדעבדינן כעבדין בחול החלה כעבד כעבדין בחול. Rabbanan, on the other hand, look at the entire the balance scale. When you use a balance scale, that's a weekday activity. So therefore, he says you can't use a balance scale at all. I don't care what you're putting on each side. Whereas here, we're using a measuring utensil is not a weekday activity. When people use measuring utensils, sometimes you just use it as a bowl. You use it as a cup. Maybe you'll drink out of it just because it has a measuring line on it. Doesn't make it a weekday activity. And therefore, unlike the balance scale, which is a weekday activity. And that's why they are stringent regarding the measuring scale, but okay with the measuring cup. Okay, so that was the first interpretation of Shemuel. Now, second interpretation of Rava, and I think Rava is more the peshat of the Mishnah. Rava amar mai aval lo b'midah. What does it mean, but not by measure? In the Mishnah, Tanakama said you can ask for, say, fill up this jug, but not a measurement. Shelo yizkor lo shem midah aval klei miyuchad midah yimale'enu. This is a much more lenient interpretation. According to this, what you cannot do is to come and say and bring, a bottle and say, fill up a gallon, this gallon bottle. You can't do that. You can't say the word gallon when you say fill it up. But even if it is a measuring cup that holds a gallon, nevertheless, you could say fill up this cup. That's okay. So you can use you're allowed to use a measuring cup. You just can't say the amount that you want. You say fill it up, and you don't say the exact amount. So that's much more lenient. And the Yehuda says, if it's a measuring cup, you can't use it. Even if you don't mention that, I want a gallon, even if you just say fill it up. No, it's a gallon bottle. So you can't use that if it's generally used for measuring. Good. Okay, now we're going to go through the same exercise for Rava. Same idea, same problem. That here it looks like Rabbi Yehuda is machmir and the Rabbanan are lenient. But we learned the opposite. In the Mishnah before, Rabbi Yehuda was the one that says you can use a cleaver as a counterweight for a balance scale. Chachamim says you can't use a balance scale at all. So same question as before. They seem to contradict each other themselves. So the Yehuda, similar answer to before, it's just a slight variation because of Rava's interpretation. So over there, you're using a cleaver, which is something that's not used generally for weighing, and so therefore he's lenient there. Whereas here you're using a measuring cup, and that's what's used for measuring. So therefore he's stringent in this case. Whereas the this is over there when using a measuring scale. That's a weekday activity. Just anytime you're using a measuring scale, usually it's going to be whenever using a measuring scale. It's generally going to be for commerce. You want to need to know exactly how much this is to know how much to charge. That's a weekday activity. Here, it's not a weekday activity because people often will come and offer their friends wine in a measuring utensil and drink. Right? I mean, it's a handy cup, and so you're not always measuring in a measuring cup. Sometimes you just use a measuring cup just to put food in, just to drink. You might even serve a friend in a measuring cup if it's a nice fancy one. And so therefore, using a measuring cup according to the Rabbanan is lenient because it's not a weekday activity. All right, and now we get to this interesting and very honest person, Abba Shaul ben Botnit, and what did he do? Tana. This is a braita that gives a slightly different reason, although it's complementary what the Mishnah said. You know why he pre-measured things on during Chol HaMoed? First of all, because he wanted to be honest. But second, he didn't want to take a lot of time away because he wanted to study in the Bet Midrash. The holidays, people have more time. So what do you do with that more time? Spend time studying. Even if you're busy all year round, on the holiday, you can spend more time studying Torah. And so therefore, and the night before, he would go pre-measure, wait till the foam went down. It takes time to wait till the foam, right? Measure everything exactly. That way he could be honest. And also, he didn't have to waste time during the day when he could be learning Torah in the Bet Midrash instead. Okay, Tenor Banan, who kanash shalosh meot karbe yain bedure hamidot. Now look how honest this Abba Shaul was. He would let's say he had a barrel with 100 gallons, and at the end, he sells 100, and he still has some left on the bottom. Well, how does he still have some left if he sold 100 and it holds 100? It means that he must have cheated his customers. Now, obviously, he didn't do this on purpose, but sometimes the customer comes and he doesn't want to wait till the foam goes down. Just give it to me as is. It's okay. But still, Abba Shaul felt like the leftover did not belong to him. It belongs to his customers, so he didn't want to take it for himself. So, and at the end of the year, he had 300 jugs of wine extra leftover that he felt did not legally belong to him. He wasn't the only honest broker. He had other friends, and they collected 300 jugs of oil that were extra leftover that they thought they should have sold. And so they didn't want to take it for themselves. So they brought it to the Bet HaMikdash, to the treasurers of the Bet HaMikdash, and said, here, we want to make a donation. The treasurers of the Bet HaMikdash says, listen, you don't need to. If it was extra foam or extra oil that was stuck on the side that didn't come out yet, the customers don't mind. The customers say, yeah, it's okay. They forgive it. So you can keep it. You don't have to donate it. But Abba Shaul and his friends says, we don't want it. We even want to benefit from a possibility of something that does not belong to us. So we don't want it either. So the treasurers say, we don't want it here either. Maybe also the Bet HaMikdash doesn't want to take something that even could be a possibility of dust of Gezel. And so they say, listen, don't donate to the Bet HaMikdash. You know what? If you think it belongs to the people, then it should go back to the people. You should give it back to them. So how do you don't know, again, you can't find every customer and give them 3 drops of wine, but rather give it to a communal good. Do a public service with it. The Tanya, Gazal ve'no yodeh limi gazal yaseh bahem sorchei rabim. And we can learn this from another law. Let's say someone really does steal. He steals from someone and he doesn't know who he stole it from, right? I don't know. He pickpocketed someone and he didn't see who it was. And now he feels bad and he wants to give it back. But who am I going to give back this money to? So if you don't know who it is, then you give it to a public fund, right? Give it to a park service, give it to a charity that helps out a common cause. So you can finance cisterns, ditches, caves. Cistern would store water for people so that when it rains, it collects there, and then they have it when it doesn't rain, and that helps everyone. So this is a fine thing to do. This fits in with the idea of philanthropy in Roman cities. Someone who is wealthy, he would donate a public fountain and give something back to the city, do something good. So this is what they did with the extra money that they, even though they really did not steal it, but they went above and beyond in their honesty. So those are their great role models. Next, Ad Bere Rav Chisda Rabana Ukva. So one time Rav Chisda authorized Rabana Ukva to give a public lecture. Rabana Ukva, he was the Resh Galuta, he's like the political head, but he's also learned. Rav Chisda is the sage, he's the religious leader, and so they work together. And Rav Chisda says, okay, Rabana Ukva, come give the guest lecture and teach some halachot. So whatever you teach in a public lecture like this is very official. So again, you're not allowed to measure And so you can't even measure, not even for the animal. So you can't measure exact amount of barley, but you can estimate, right? You just take 1 or 2 kav. You know by just by eye that a certain amount is that big, and so you make a hole that size and you give it to the animal. You don't have to worry about that. But the idea is to estimate it, not to make it exact. However, if you have a baker and he's putting spices in the pot, and it has to be exact, if you put a little too much allspice, it's going to ruin it, then that person is allowed to measure exactly so that he won't spoil his food. Okay, both of these are relevant for halacha l'maaseh. So if someone is like baking, and you're putting like sugar in a cake, and if you put a little more sugar or a little less sugar, it doesn't really matter. It'll still taste good. It doesn't have to be exact. So in that case, you can't measure exactly. What you can do is measure approximately, right? You take like a cup, a measuring cup, and you put about the amount that you need, just to estimate, so you don't put way too much or way too little, and that's okay. And if it is a dish that needs a precise amount of a certain spice, then it is permitted to do that exact amount if that's the way that you always do it. Unlike the way your grandmother does it, just a dash, a pinchful. Then if you generally don't measure and it doesn't really matter, then you can't. So the laws of measuring on Yom Tov are a little bit complex, but they're also somewhat flexible. So when you really need to, yes, you can. If you don't need to, then you can't. Okay, I'll just add here halacha l'maaseh that anything that's for medical purpose, you're allowed to, or for a mitzvah, you're allowed to measure. So if you need to know, someone has to eat on Yom Kippur, so they want to have a minimum measurement, so they don't want to just estimate, because they want to make sure that they're going to have less than an ounce. So then they can measure that. Or on Pesach, some people want to measure to make sure that they are having the kezayit, kabesa. So things like that, one can measure. Medicine, you don't want to take too much, too little of the medication, that's allowed. You're allowed to take, someone has a fever, you're allowed to take their temperature and measure with an old style thermometer, not an electric thermometer. So all these things would be permitted. So there are some limitations on measuring on Yom Tov, but it's not strict that you can never measure. It really depends on each different case. So those are some general guidelines, but it's worth learning these halachot in more detail. Amar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Rav, בודדת אישה קמח ביום טוב ונותן לתוך עיסתה כדי שתטול חלה בעין יפה. Here would be an example of doing it for a mitzvah, that you can measure the dough. A woman who's making dough can measure the flour because she wants to give challah and she wants to give generously. And so she wants to know how much challah is there so that she can give a lot. This would not apply nowadays, since nowadays Kohanim can't eat it anyway. We just take a very little bit of dough. She did. Rav said that's okay. Shmuel says no, you can't measure the dough. Hold on. Shmuel himself says you're not allowed to measure dough, even if you want to know how much challah to give. Not allowed. But the school of Shmuel said it's allowed. So this is strange that his school said it's permitted, but Shmuel himself said it's not allowed. So this is a strange contradiction. Amar Abaye, Hashtad Amar Shmuel Asur, Betana Debe Shmuel Mutar. Now that we have both of these traditions, Shmuel halacha l'maaseh atar l'shmuinan. It must be that Shmuel is giving us the bottom line. In other words, in the school, they were talking theoretically. Theoretically, it could be permitted, and they gave many reasons why it would be permitted. But Shmuel said, listen, halacha l'maaseh, don't follow that. That was just theoretical talk, but don't actually do that. This might be similar to the halacha ve'en morin ken. Although you can justify it, but we don't teach this to the public that this would be permitted. So he wanted to teach a stringent position, despite the school having reasons to be lenient. Next, tenora banan en shonin kemach beyom tov mishum Rabbi Papias v'Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera ameru shonin. Okay, now we're talking about another topic, which is sifting on Yom Tov. Sifting is one of the melachot, right? You're taking flour and you put it through a sifter so that the impurities stay on top and the fine flour goes down. You're not allowed to do this on Shabbat, you're not allowed to do this on Yom Tov either, sifting for the first time, because this is something that you could have done before Yom Tov, and it wouldn't detract from the taste of it at all. So therefore, sifting has to be done before. Here we're talking about shonin, re-sifting. Sometimes after you sift, you would sift again because it makes the flour extra fluffy and nice and fine. It doesn't really take anything out. You just sift to make it tastier. So this is a machloket. The first opinion says you're not allowed to do it. Second opinion says you're allowed to do it. Why not? Well, you're putting extra effort in. You're doing an act that's basically the same thing as sifting, so it's not okay. The second opinion says nothing's coming out. You're not doing anything. Just running it through a sifter, and nothing is, no garbage is being taken out. So you're not doing any melacha. So therefore, it's allowed. Yet both opinions agree that, let's say, some pebbles or wood chips fell into the flour and you want to get them out. So now how are you going to get them out? Then you're allowed to sift it out, because otherwise there's no easy way to get these items out of the flour. In that case, it's permitted, and this probably is a case where it fell in on Yom Tov. So there's no way that you could have done it before Yom Tov. So then that is permitted to do on Yom Tov. Now, Tane Tana Kamed Rabina, En Shonin Kemach Be Yom Tov, Aval Nafal Seror or Kesam Borer Biyado. Another option, according to Ravina, says you cannot re-sift on Yom Tov, but if a rock or a piece of wood fell in, then you could take it out by hand. In other words, don't sift it, just take the rock out. Right, so Ravina told that this reciter of Baraitot says, no, that's even worse, because then you're violating another melacha of borer, taking the bad from the good. Better to sift than to go ahead and take it out by hand. One time, this sage, Rava bar Rav Huna Zuteh, he came to Nahar De'ah and he gave a public lecture. Guest lecture, let's hear his chidush. And he says, Shonin kemach b'yom tov. He followed the lenient opinion, and he thought he's been giving them a great chidush that you're allowed to re-sift on Yom Tov. Amalu Rav Nachman, who's the rabbi of the place, says, Puku v'imru le'aba shikilu tibutach ushti achizri. Pok chazi kama meho lata hadran be'nahar de'ah. So he says, go tell Abba, that was his first name of the sage, Rava is Rav Abba. Go tell Abba, take your benefit and throw it on the thorns. In other words, you thought you're coming to do us a great favor, that you're telling us this big leniency that we're allowed to re-sift. We don't need your favor. Go look around and see how many sieves there are circulating on Yom Tov. In other words, the people living on Nahar De'ah, they already know that it's permitted. They do this all the time. He thinks he's coming and giving them a big leniency. They were already doing this. So, take your benefit, throw it on thorns. Okay, that's a fun expression. Debitu de Rav Yosef nahala kimcha agaba de meholta. And Rav Yosef's wife, in fact, once was sifting flour, and she was doing it on the opposite side. She was using the sifter upside down. And those to do it with a shinui. She felt like, yes, you shouldn't do it in the regular way. Do it with a shinui, and then it's permitted. So her husband said to her, listen, I like this good quality bread. In other words, don't do it in an unusual way. Do it in the regular way. I like it to be very sifted, very fine, and that way it tastes better. Okay, so he seems to be saying you don't need to. The wife of Rav Asher, she would sift onto a table. In other words, rather than collect it in a bowl, she sifts it and the flour goes onto the table. Amar Rav Asher, hadidan berate derame bar Chama. This one, meaning my wife, that's mine, she is the daughter of Rami bar Chama. Rami bar Chama marad Obadah haba. And Rami bar Chama was a master of deeds. He was always very particular to make sure to do things correctly. And she wouldn't do this on her own. She must have seen this practice in her father's house, that you do sifting, but you do it in an unusual way and let it go on the table. And therefore, she learned this halacha from there. So it's a correct halacha. So then, and according to them, one may sift not in a regular manner, but in an unusual manner. All right, and now next Mishnah. Holech adam esel chenvani haragil etzlo. ואומר לו, תן לי בסים ואגוזים במניין, שכן דרך בעל הבית להיות מונה בתוך ביתו. One is permitted to go to the grocer, the one he always goes to, and he can say, please sell me eggs and nuts, this many. I want a dozen eggs. I want 50 nuts. And you say the number, because even at home, people tend to count things in this way. And so the point is that even though beforehand we said, you're not allowed to go and say, I want a gallon of wine or I want a pound of meat. In those cases, you're not allowed to use an exact measure. But for these things, like eggs and nuts, people all the time, it's not a professional way of measuring to say, you go to your friend, hey, can I have 2 eggs? So we always count them according to the number. It's not a commercial activity, and therefore it's permitted at home and it's permitted at the grocery store also. Remember that the grocery stores were open on Yom Tov, and people would come in and take what they need because they didn't have refrigerators and have pantries, so they had to go and get things. They just would not exchange money and not talk about prices, and that way everyone could enjoy and get the ingredients they need on Yom Tov. And now the Baraita is going to expand with other similar examples. You can go to your local shepherd, the shepherd you always go to, and you can tell him, give me the regular, right? Since you know him, he knows you, and you trust each other. So you can just say, give me a kid, give me a lamb, and he will give it to you. You can go to the butcher that you used to and say, give me 1 leg, give me 1 thigh. You go to the bird dealer and you tell him, I want 1 dove or 1 pigeon. You go to your usual baker and you say, give me a loaf, give me 1 cake. So since they know you and you know them and you trust each other, then you'll pay for it afterwards. And he knows what you like, so he knows how much you like, so it's all very easy. The Baraita continues and says, you can go to the grocer and you could say, give me 20 eggs or 50 nuts. We don't usually count how many nuts today. That we would do by the pound, but in those days, they would count how many nuts. Asara afarsekin, chamisha rimonim, vetrog echad, lebat shelo yaskir lo sechum mida. Or you could say 10 peaches, 5 pomegranates, 1 etrog, for example, as long as you don't say the measure that you want, this much weight or this much volume. But if you say the number of fruits, that's also fine. That's not a commercial activity. And last line, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar omer, "Bilbad shelo yaskir lo sechum mikach." And so Rabbi Shimon just make sure also, not only can you not make a measurement, but also you cannot say the amount of the purchase. You can't say, give me $10 worth of nuts. That would also be doing commerce on the holiday. And so this way, the rabbis give a nice balance between, on the one hand, not doing commercial activity on Yom Tov. On the other hand, you don't want to be too machmir, because then you can't enjoy and have food and cook on Yom Tov. And so by allowing people to go and get the ingredients they need, but not talk about money, it really creates a really nice, beautiful environment. People going around, and the butchers, everybody's giving away, their produce, and the people are taking it. And then all the accounts are settled later. That we don't have to think about money on the holiday, but you can still enjoy and have a wonderful Chag Sameach. Hazran alach en sadin chazakim u'beruchim on completing this perek. Baruch Adonai l'olam. Amen v'amen.